we're gonna do an activity that you can do to work on your child's memory and their verbal working memory. So you wanna start small with maybe 2 objects. A prerequisite for this activity would be that your child has object permanence. So you can do this with toddlers, but they do have to know that once you cover an object, it is still there. And they need to have some basic labels for objects. So you can start with 2 everyday objects and help your child to label them first, so like glass and fork. And then you wanna cover them up and see if they can remember what's under the napkin or the tablecloth that you've covered. So you can say where to go or what is it? And then you can help them try to remember, what was it? What did I hide? Glass, fork. They might need some modeling initially if they're very young. You can do this with much older kids. Obviously, like this is an old party game where you might have like 20 objects on a tray. You get to look at them for like a minute. You try and remember, then you cover them up and you list them all out. So you can do this down to very young kids. So start with 2, and then like I said, you can model for them and try to remember them. You can do this in various ways. So like I said, you can do it with just 2 objects. You can do it with 3, you can do it with 5. If they're not literate, then you don't probably want to go much more than 5. It's hard to remember that many. You can do it so that the objects are all related, so that it's spoon, fork, glass, all things you might use at the table. You can do that so the objects are not related. And sometimes it is easier for kids to think of it when they're all related, and sometimes it's harder. So if you're thinking of perhaps maybe all fruits, this might be easier for some friends to think of when you're covering it up, because they have to think of the 3 different fruits that are under there. It might be harder for some because they might get those confused. They might have word finding issues. So it kind of depends on your child and the child you're working with, if this presents more of a challenge or if it makes it easier if you group them together. And that might make the activity more or less appealing if you want to stick within a category. So you can also think about ways to group them if you want to stick with all round objects. You can also think about the functions of objects. Things you all do, things you put in your hands. So you can hide those 3 objects, have them think and remember them. And those are some mnemonic device you could help them think of too. Do you remember what you did with those objects? You can also, of course, go into some toy bins and think of some animals. Where did those animals live? Do you remember what those animals were? What color were those animals? And so those are different ways to think about the objects underneath and different ways to help them remember. So you want to cover them up, they think about it, and then they have to label what's underneath the napkin.